The sun rose slowly over the wide desert, and the land looked endless and quiet. The sand stretched far in every direction, and the heat was already heavy in the air. A woman walked alone beside a dusty road with slow, tired steps. She had been traveling for many hours, hoping to reach the next town before night. Her body felt heavy, and her breath came short. She was far along in her pregnancy, and every movement took effort. She stopped often to rest, placing one hand on her belly and the other on her knee. She had known the trip would be hard, but she had not expected the road to feel so lonely. There were no cars, no buildings, and no signs of life. Only the sound of wind moving across the sand followed her. She kept telling herself to stay calm and keep walking, because stopping too long in the desert could be dangerous. As the sun climbed higher, the heat grew stronger. Her mouth felt dry, and her water supply was running low. She looked ahead and saw nothing but the road fading into the distance. Fear started to rise inside her. She tried to push it away by thinking of the babies growing inside her. She spoke softly to them, promising that everything would be fine and that help would come soon. Without warning, a sharp pain moved through her body. She froze and leaned forward, breathing hard. She had felt pain before, but this was different, stronger and deeper. Another wave followed, and she knew the truth. Her time had come, and it was too early. She was not near a hospital, and she was not ready for this moment. She lowered herself to the ground, slowly using her bag for support. The sand was hot and rough against her skin. Her heart raced as she tried to think clearly. She checked the road again, hoping to see a vehicle, but the road remained empty. The desert gave no answer to her fear. She closed her eyes for a moment and focused on breathing. The pain returned again, and this time it stayed. Longer tears filled her eyes, not from weakness, but from the weight of the moment. She was alone, carrying two lives inside her, and the desert showed no mercy. Remembered the doctor telling her she was expecting twins, and how careful she needed to be. That memory now felt distant and unreal. The future she had imagined seemed to slip away with each painful breath. Still, she refused to give up. She told herself that panic would only make things worse. The sun burned above her, and time seemed to slow. Her strength faded, and her legs trembled. She tried to stand again, hoping to keep moving, but another pain forced her back down. She understood now that she could not walk any farther. She took a deep breath and made a small shelter with her bag and scarf, creating a little shade. It was not much, but it helped. She drank the last of her water, carefully knowing she might need it later. Her thoughts moved between fear and determination. She was scared, but she was also a mother, and that gave her strength. The desert around her felt alive in a quiet way, and carried distant sounds that might have been nothing or might have been something. She listened closely between each breath, hoping for footsteps or voices. All she heard was the steady rhythm of her own breathing. Another pain came stronger. Then, before she cried out softly, then covered her mouth, she did not want to waste energy. She focused on staying calm and letting her body do what it needed to do. She spoke to the babies again, telling them to hold on just a little longer as ours. Past the heat pressed down harder, her skin felt hot, and her head felt light. She worried about losing consciousness and forced herself to stay awake. She looked at the sky and followed the slow movement of clouds, trying to keep her mind focused. At one point she thought she saw a figure far away moving along the edge of the desert. Her heart jumped with hope. She strained her eyes, but the figure faded into the light and heat. She did not know if it was real or only her mind playing tricks on her. The pain returned again and again. Each time it took more from her body. She held the sand in her hands and tried to stay grounded. The desert seemed endless and uncaring, but she refused to let that break her spirit. She thought about how she had ended up there and wished she had waited or chosen another path. Regret filled her mind, but she pushed it away. This was not the time for regret. This was the time to survive. The day slowly moved toward afternoon. The light changed slightly, and shadows grew longer. She felt weak and exhausted. Her body told her that time was running out. She knew she needed help soon, or she and the babies might not make it. She whispered a quiet prayer into the open air, not for miracles but for strength, and for someone to find her. The desert answered only with silence, but she held on to hope. As the sun began its slow fall, she heard a sound different from the wind. It was faint but real footsteps moving across sand. Her heart raced as she turned. Her head waited, her breath caught as a shape grew clearer in the distance. A person walking with steady, calm steps toward her hope turned stronger than fear as she realized she was no longer alone. The figure walking toward the woman grew closer. With each step, she could see the lines of a face and the calm strength in the way the person moved. The heat of the desert did not slow him down. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down to speak softly to her. She could see the kind eyes and the patience that made her feel a small relief for the first time. That day he asked if she was hurt, and she shook her head weakly. She explained that she was about to give birth and that she was far from help. He nodded without judgment and immediately began looking around for a safe place to stay. He pointed out a small dip in the sand nearby that would give some shelter from the sun and wind. He moved quickly, gathering some pieces of cloth and sandbags to make a more comfortable space for her. He worked with calm hands, and every movement was careful, as if he had done this many times before. She watched in amazement and tried to focus on his voice instead of the pain. He asked her to take slow, deep breaths and reminded her to stay as calm as she could. He poured a little water into her hand and she drank carefully. The heat still pressed down on them, but she felt a sense of protection that she had not felt before. He knelt beside her and began giving instructions, gently telling her how to position herself, how to relax her shoulders, and how to use her strength to push when the time came. She listened closely and trusted him, even though she barely knew him. She realized that in the middle of the desert, he was now her only hope. Pain returned stronger, and she began to cry softly. He held her hand and spoke softly, telling her that it was okay to feel the pain, that it was part of the process. He reminded her to breathe, and that she was not alone. She felt a strange warmth inside as she realized that someone truly cared about her, and the baby's hours passed slowly. The sun moved across the sky and shadows changed around them. He never left her side, constantly checking her and giving support whenever she lost strength. He encouraged her to keep going and reminded her of the babies waiting for her. He found small pieces of shade and moved them to protect her face and shoulders from the sun. He wet a cloth with water and wiped her skin to cool her down. His attention to every detail made her feel more safe and more able to endure the pain. As the day turned warmer, he kept an eye on the horizon in case any travelers came by. He explained that in this desert it was rare to see another human being, but that they would need luck if they hoped for help. He reassured her that he would not leave her even if no one else came. She began to feel tired and scared as the contractions grew longer and stronger. He whispered instructions in her ear and reminded her that she had done this before with strength and courage. She focused on his voice and the rhythm he made with her breathing and tried to hold on to the small sense of control she could still feel. At one point, she felt herself losing balance, and he quickly supported her, holding her weight with careful strength. She leaned against him and felt her fear lessen. She realized that without him she could not have managed the heat and the pain alone. The desert seemed less cruel when he was there, though. Babies were coming faster than she expected. She felt a mixture of fear and hope as she followed his guidance. He told her to push slowly and steadily, and she tried to listen. His calm confidence helped her mind focus away from the pain and onto the task of bringing life into the world. Time moved differently in the desert. The sun seemed to burn longer, and the shadows shifted in slow motion. He never rushed her, nor did he seem afraid. He stayed steady and patient, guiding her with every movement. In breath, she felt a strange sense of peace in his presence, despite the danger all around. She thought of the babies inside her and whispered soft words of comfort to them. He encouraged her to continue speaking to them and remind them that they were strong and loved. His presence gave her strength she did not know she still had. Finally, the first baby arrived. Her body shook with relief and exhaustion. He held the baby gently and placed it close to her. She looked at the tiny, fragile face and felt tears of joy and exhaustion. She knew she could not have done this alone, and she thanked him. Silently in her mind, the second baby came soon after, and she felt another wave of emotion and relief. She was still weak and dizzy, but seeing both babies alive and breathing filled her with gratitude. She held them as best as she could, and he adjusted blankets and cloth to keep them warm. He continued to care for her, checking her pulse, giving water, and helping her adjust her position. She felt a deep trust in him and a strange sense of safety in the open desert. She knew that without his knowledge and calm presence, she might not have survived. As the sun began to lower in the sky, he prepared a small area for the night, covering them from the wind and protecting them from the harsh desert air. He gathered sand and cloth to make a warmer space for the babies and explained how important it was to keep them close to her body for warmth. She felt exhaustion mixed with relief as she watched him move calmly. He spoke little, but every action showed care and understanding. She realized that he had lived much of his life in the desert and had learned skills that no one else around here would know. She felt gratitude beyond words. Night came slowly and the temperature began to drop. She held the babies close and felt the warmth of their tiny bodies. He moved around, softly adjusting their position and adding layers to keep the wind from touching them. She felt comforted knowing that he knew exactly what to do. The desert night was quiet and strange. She listened to the soft sounds of the wind moving across the sand and to the occasional call of a distant animal. He stayed near her, guiding her in keeping the babies warm and encouraging her to rest for short moments when she thought about how she had come to this place and the loneliness she had felt before he arrived. She realized that meeting him had changed everything and given her hope when all seemed lost. She held the babies close and whispered that they had a guardian in the desert with them. In the darkness, the man stayed vigilant, making sure the babies and mother were safe. She finally felt able to close her eyes for brief, trusting that he would continue to care for them. He moved quietly and confidently, and the desert felt less dangerous because of his presence. She thought about what she would tell others later, how she had been alone and afraid, and how one person had given everything to help her survive. She smiled weakly at the thought, knowing that their lives had already been changed by this unexpected stranger. Hours passed in quiet care, and she felt the bond between them grow. She understood that this moment in the desert had created trust and connection that would never be forgotten. Even though she had been terrified, she now felt a small peace, knowing that help had arrived just in time. Night had fully settled over the desert, and the sky was dark with stars sparkling faintly above. The mother held her newborn twins close, feeling their warmth against her chest. She was exhausted from the birth and from the long day in the desert. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she knew she had to stay alert for the babies. The Sioux man stayed near her, moving quietly and carefully around the small shelter he had made. He adjusted blankets and cloth to keep the wind from touching the babies and checked that they were breathing steadily. He spoke softly, reminding the mother to breathe and to hold the babies close. She listened to his calm voice and felt her fear lessen. The temperature dropped quickly in the desert night, and the mother felt the chill seep into her bones. She hugged the babies tighter and he placed extra cloth around them for warmth. He explained quietly how important it was to share body heat and to keep the little ones covered at all times. She nodded weakly, grateful for his knowledge and guidance. Hours passed slowly, and the desert remained quiet. She listened to the soft sounds of the wind moving across the sand and the distant calls of animals. Her mind drifted between exhaustion and relief. She thought about how fragile life could be in this place and how fortunate she was that he had arrived when he did. He checked on her often and made sure she drank small sips of water. He reminded her that she needed to stay hydrated even if she felt too tired to think about it. She followed his instructions as best she could, trusting his experience and calm presence in this harsh environment. Mother thought about the babies and whispered soft words to them, telling them they were safe and loved. She looked at their tiny faces and felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. She felt fear, exhaustion, gratitude, and love. All at once. The Sioux man stayed nearby and watched quietly, giving her space but ready to act whenever needed. He explained gently how to wrap the babies, to protect them from the wind, and how to keep them warm with layers of cloth and sand. He moved with steady hands and careful attention. She watched and tried to remember every detail, knowing that it might save their lives if he had to leave. The night seemed endless, but she held on to the comfort of his presence. She could not imagine facing this alone. The desert was dangerous and unforgiving, and even the smallest Mistake could be deadly. He showed her how to feel for signs of distress in the babies and how to respond quickly without panic. Thought about her own strength and how she had survived this long. She realized that fear had almost overcome her. But that hope had returned with his arrival. She held the babies tightly and whispered that they were strong and that they would make it. Through the night, he moved around the small area, checking the surroundings and adjusting the shelter. He explained quietly that predators could be near and that they had to remain cautious. She nodded, understanding the seriousness of their situation, and trusted his experience completely. Time passed slowly, and her body recovered a little from the birth she felt. Stronger as she learned from him and followed his guidance, the babies slept close to her chest, and she could feel their small breathing patterns. She whispered to them gently, telling them they were safe and loved. He reminded her to rest in short bursts and to let her body regain strength, even if it was only for a few moments at a time. She leaned back against the cloth and sand shelter and closed her eyes, briefly feeling the small comfort of his presence nearby. The night air was cold, but the small space they had created was protected enough to keep them from freezing. She adjusted the blankets and held the babies tightly. She felt grateful for every small thing he had done to keep them safe and warm. She thought about how quickly her life had changed in one day. She had gone from fear and loneliness to safety and trust in a stranger who had arrived just in time. Her mind tried to process everything, but exhaustion always returned, pulling her into short moments of rest. He continued to move around softly and quietly, checking the babies and making sure that she had water. He reminded her to eat small bites if she could, and to keep her strength for the long night ahead. She followed his instructions, even if she had little energy, and felt a small sense of accomplishment in doing so. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to appear faintly on the horizon. The night had been long and exhausting, but the babies had survived, and she had endured through it. With his help, she felt relief mixed with gratitude, knowing that they had made it through the most dangerous part of the journey. He advised her to keep the babies close and to be ready for the next stage of survival, which would be finding help. He explained quietly how to move safely and how to protect the babies from exposure. She listened carefully and felt a growing trust in his knowledge and instinct. She thought about the desert and its harsh beauty. She realized that it could have been deadly if not for his arrival. She felt a deep respect for the land and for the man who had guided them through the night. She held the babies and whispered to them softly, telling them that they had a protector. The Sioux man spoke quietly about the importance of patience and observation in the desert. He reminded her that rushing could be dangerous and that every step needed care. She nodded, understanding the lesson, and felt grateful for his guidance. The sun began to rise fully, and the desert took on a softer light. She felt a small sense of hope for the first time since the birth. The night had been long and difficult, but they had survived. She looked at the babies and felt their tiny hands grasping her fingers and felt a wave of love and determination. He helped her adjust the cloth and blankets as the temperature rose. He reminded her to keep the babies hydrated and to continue speaking softly to them. She followed his instructions carefully and felt stronger knowing that she had someone experienced guiding them. Desert remained quiet and vast, but the mother felt a small sense of control. She had survived the birth and the night with the help of a man who had appeared when she needed him most. She held the babies and whispered softly, telling them that they were strong and that they would make it through the day. As she watched the first light of day move across the desert and felt a strange sense of peace. Despite the challenges ahead, the Sioux man stayed close, and she trusted him completely, knowing that his knowledge and calm presence could keep them safe. She held the babies tightly and prepared for the next stage of their journey. The first light of day slowly spread across the desert, and the mother held her newborn twins close. She felt the warmth of their small bodies and the soft rise and fall of their tiny chests. The night had been long and exhausting, but they had survived. The Sioux man moved quietly nearby, preparing for the next part of their journey. He checked the babies and adjusted the blankets to protect them from the morning chill. He spoke softly, explaining that they needed to start moving toward help. He showed her the safest path through the sand and pointed out small landmarks to follow. She listened carefully and tried to store every detail in her mind. She felt weak, but the knowledge that they could reach safety gave her strength. They began walking slowly with the mother holding the twins as he guided her. Each step was difficult because she was still recovering from the birth and the babies needed constant care. He reminded her to rest when needed and to use the small shaded areas along the way to protect the children from the sun. The desert was vast and unforgiving, and every movement required focus. He taught her how to observe the wind and the sand for signs of animals and how to read the subtle changes in the terrain. She followed him closely, trusting his experience and his eternal calm presence. She felt the babies stir and whispered to them softly, telling them they were safe and loved. He encouraged her to keep speaking to them and to respond quickly to their needs. She did her best to follow his guidance, adjusting their position and making sure they stayed warm and comfortable. They paused occasionally for short rests. Hydrate the babies with small sips of water and how to check their temperature with her hands. She felt grateful for his knowledge and the quiet way he shared it without rushing or judging. As they moved through the sand, the mother thought about the life she had left behind and the journey that had brought her here. She reflected on the fear she had felt alone and how the arrival of the Sioux man had changed everything. She felt gratitude and a sense of trust that went beyond words. He told her stories quietly about the desert and its ways, how to find hidden water, how to move without making noise, and how to survive. When help was far away, she listened closely, absorbing the wisdom and feeling reassured that they could make it through. The day the sun rose higher and the heat began to build, he helped her find small shaded spots to rest and covered the babies carefully. He reminded her to protect their skin and to keep them close to her body. She followed his instructions and felt a growing confidence in her ability to care for them. They moved slowly but steadily. She felt the sand burn beneath her feet and the weight of the twins in her arms, but she also felt a new strength and determination. He stayed close, guiding her and offering quiet encouragement. She realized that every step they took together brought them closer to safety. One point they came to a ridge and she looked out across the desert. The vastness was overwhelming, but she could see distant signs of life in the far distance. He pointed out safe paths and told her to keep focus on small goals rather than the endless horizon. She followed his advice and felt her fear lessen with each step. The babies began to stir again, and she adjusted them. Carefully, he reminded her to talk to them and to keep their bodies warm. She whispered soft words, telling them to hold on and that they were strong. The Sioux man moved quietly, making sure they had shade and that the path ahead was clear. They passed small patches of scrub and dry riverbeds. He explained how to use these natural features for safety and for finding small amounts of water. She listened and followed his lead carefully, feeling more capable with every lesson. The desert seemed to stretch endlessly, but she trusted his experience. He'd moved through it many times before. She could see the confidence in the way he read the land, stopped occasionally to point out landmarks and to show her signs that others would have missed. She felt lucky to have someone so knowledgeable guiding them. The day grew hotter. He encouraged her to rest more often and to keep the babies close. He showed her how to use the cloth and blankets for protection from the sun and how to adjust their position to prevent overheating. She followed every instruction, carefully, feeling a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. She thought about the future and the small hope that had returned with each step they were moving toward safety and way. Helping, she could see a faint outline of distant hills. He explained that the journey was still long, but that they would reach people who could assist them soon. She felt a renewed determination to keep going. The baby slept for short moments, and she used that time to rest and regain strength. He moved around quietly, checking on them and making sure she stayed hydrated and nourished. She watched him and felt a deep trust and respect for the calm way he cared for all of them. They continued their journey through the desert, and she began to feel a connection to the land. She noticed the way the wind shifted and the patterns in the sand. He encouraged her to observe these details and to move with patience. She followed his advice and felt a growing sense of understanding. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and the heat pressed down more strongly. She felt the weight of the twins and her own tired body, but she refused to give up. He stayed close, supporting her physically and emotionally, guiding them towards safety. She felt grateful for every small action and every quiet word of encouragement ours. Past and the mother realized that she was stronger than she had believed. She had faced fear, pain, and exhaustion, and had survived. She held the twins tightly and whispered to them softly, telling them they were brave and loved. He continued to guide them, pointing out safe paths and offering advice on how to manage the terrain. Finally, she saw signs of life in the distance. A small building and faint movement of people. She felt a rush of relief mixed with disbelief. He reminded her to move carefully and to keep the babies protected. She adjusted the cloth and held the children close, feeling the first real hope of reaching help. The journey had been long and difficult, but she realized that every step had brought them closer to safety. She felt a deep gratitude for the Sioux man who had guided them through the desert with patience, knowledge, and care. She whispered soft words to the babies, telling them they had survived because someone had been there to help. They continued moving slowly toward the signs of help. The mother felt exhaustion, but also determination. She knew that they were nearly safe, and that the desert night and day had tested them all, but that they had endured. She held the twins tightly and trusted the Sioux man completely as he led them toward the promise of safety and aid. The mother continued moving slowly across the desert, with the Sioux man guiding her, and the twins held close. She could see the faint outline of people and buildings in the distance. Her heart lifted with hope after the long journey through sand, heat, and fear. She felt the baby shift and whispered softly, telling them that help was near. The Sioux man moved beside her, checking that the babies were warm and comfortable. He encouraged her to keep moving and reminded her to take small rests when needed. She followed his advice carefully, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. Each step brought them closer to safety and to people who could care for them. The desert stretched around them, and the sun climbed higher, making the journey more difficult. She adjusted the cloth and blankets around the babies to protect them from the heat. The Sioux man pointed out small areas of shade and encouraged her to drink water. He shared quiet words of encouragement that helped her keep going as they moved. She noticed the soft sound of voices carried by the wind. She felt a surge of hope and energy. She followed his guidance, carefully moving toward the sound. Each step was heavy with tiredness, but lightened by the thought of reaching safety. Buildings grew clearer, and they saw people coming out to meet them. The Sioux man gestured to approach slowly and calmly. He explained that sudden movements could alarm people unfamiliar with the desert. He guided the mother and the babies gently toward the waiting hands and caring faces. The people approached and took one look at the babies and the exhausted mother. They offered water and food and helped her to sit in the shade. She felt the first real relief as someone carefully took the babies to check their health. She watched as they were cleaned and wrapped in soft cloth. Her heart swelled with gratitude. The Sioux Dan stood quietly nearby, observing. She wanted to thank him, but words felt too small for what he had done. She realized that he had risked much to guide them and keep them alive in the desert. She held the babies close, feeling their warmth and the sense of life that had survived. Against all odds, the people around them worked quickly, offering blankets, water, and food. They checked the babies and told her that they were healthy and strong despite the harsh conditions. The mother felt tears of relief and gratitude. She whispered soft words to the babies, telling them they were brave and loved. The Sioux man finally spoke softly, reminding her to rest and recover fully. He told her that the desert could be unforgiving and that they had survived because they had taken every careful step. He encouraged her to let herself accept help and to trust in the people who had come to assist. She felt a deep sense of connection and respect for him. She realized that his presence had been the difference between life and death. His quiet knowledge and calm confidence had guided them through the most difficult moments. She could not imagine how she would have managed without him. Hours passed, and she rested while the babies slept nearby. She felt the heat of the day soften and the shadows grow longer. The people continued to care for them, making sure that food, water, and warmth were available. She felt safe for the first time in days and allowed herself to relax slightly. The Sioux man began to prepare to leave. He had guided them through the desert and ensured that they had reached help. She wanted to ask him to stay, but he shook his head gently, explaining that he belonged to the land and that his help had been a gift. She felt gratitude that went beyond words and watched him move back toward the desert. She looked at the babies and realized how close they had come to danger. She felt a wave of love and determination. She would tell them one day about the man who had appeared in the desert and how he had saved their lives. She whispered soft words to the twins, telling them they were brave and that they had a guardian who had helped them when they needed it most. The people around them continued to offer care and support. She began to regain her strength and felt her body recover from the long journey and the birth of the twins. She held them tightly, feeling the rise and fall of their tiny chests and the warmth of their small bodies against her own. She thought about the desert and the loneliness she had felt there, how she had faced fear and uncertainty, and how one person had given her the courage to survive. She realized that life could change in an instant, and that help could come from unexpected places. She felt a deep respect for the Sioux man and the wisdom he had shared. As the sun moved lower in the sky, she felt a sense of peace. She had survived the desert, the birth, and the long journey with the twins. She held them close and whispered softly, telling them that they were loved and safe. She knew that they had been given a second chance at life. The people around them continued to offer food, water, and blankets. She felt a sense of gratitude that filled her heart. She looked toward the desert, knowing that it had tested her, but it also brought them to safety. She felt a connection to the land and to the man who had guided them through it. Night began to fall, and the mother felt her body recover further. She watched the baby sleep and felt a deep sense of accomplishment and relief. She realized that the journey had taught her strength, patience, and the value of trust. She whispered soft words to the twins, telling them they were brave and that they had survived against all odds. The Sioux man had returned to the desert, but his presence remained in her heart. She felt a quiet sense of connection and gratitude for the courage and knowledge he had shared. He had shown her the importance of patience, observation, and careful action in a harsh environment. She held the babies tightly and felt a sense of hope for the future. The people around her continued to care for the family. She felt safe and supported and began to regain strength. She knew that they would be able to recover fully, and that the twins would grow up knowing the story of their survival in the desert. She whispered softly to them, telling them that they were loved and that they had a guardian. The desert had tested them in every way, but they had endured. The mother held the twins close and felt the warmth of their bodies and the strength of their small hearts. She realized that life had given them a chance to survive and to grow. She felt deep gratitude for the Sioux man and for the people who had received them. As the night fully settled over the land, she felt peace. She had survived fear, pain, and uncertainty. She held the twins tightly and whispered softly, telling them that they were strong and loved. She knew that their story would remain in her heart forever, and that the courage and kindness of a stranger had changed their lives. The mother sat quietly in the small shelter, surrounded by the people who had helped them. She held the twins close, feeling their warmth and soft breathing. She was slowly regaining strength, and the fear from the desert began to fade. She thought about the long journey and the nights she had spent without knowing if she would survive. She looked at the babies and whispered softly that they were brave and strong. People around her offered food, water, and blankets, making sure that the babies were healthy and that she was recovering. They asked questions gently about the journey, and she answered as best as she could. She felt grateful for their kindness and care, knowing that without help they could not have made it through the desert. She thought about the Sioux man and how he had appeared just in time to guide them. He had moved with calm confidence and knowledge that had saved their lives. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and felt a deep sense of gratitude that went beyond words. She held the twins tightly and whispered to them that they had a guardian in the desert. The babies began to stir, and she adjusted them carefully, making sure they were comfortable. She watched their small faces and felt a wave of love and determination. She realized that she had survived not just for herself but for them, and that gave her strength to keep going. The people around them continued to care for the family, checking on the babies and offering food and water. She felt a sense of safety that she had not known. In days, the desert was behind them, and now they had help and protection. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling relief and gratitude. She began to speak softly to the babies, telling them stories about the land, about hope, and about courage. She remembered the nights in the desert when the Sioux man had guided them and tried to pass on the calm and strength he had shown. She wanted them to know that even in fear they could find courage and help. Hers passed and the mother slowly regained energy. She stood and walked a few steps, holding the babies close. She felt the weight of their small bodies, but also the growing strength in her own. She realized that the desert had tested them in every way, and that surviving had given them a new sense of resilience. The people offered to help her bathe and feed the babies. She accepted with gratitude, knowing that their experience and care would help the twins thrive. She felt a quiet joy as the babies responded to gentle touch and warmth. She whispered to them, telling them that they were safe and loved. The mother began to think about the future and the life she wanted for the twins. She knew that they had been given a second chance, and that they would grow up with the story of survival. In kindness, she felt hope and determination to provide them with everything they needed to grow strong and healthy. As the day went on, she walked slowly with the babies in her arms, feeling the sun on her face and the soft breeze of the shelter. She noticed the small details around her, the way the people cared for each other, the way the babies responded to touch and warmth. She realized that life could be harsh, but also full of unexpected kindness. She remembered the desert and how alone she had felt before the Sioux man arrived. She thought about how every step and every decision he had guided them through had saved their lives. She felt a deep sense of connection to him and to the land that had tested them. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them that they had survived against all odds. The mother took time to rest and let her body heal. She held the babies close and listened to the soft sounds of their breathing. She felt the weight of the journey, but also the relief of having survived. She knew that the story of this day would stay with them forever, and that it would shape the lives of the twins. People continued to support her, offering food, water, and guidance. She accepted their help and felt grateful for the community that had welcomed them. She realized that surviving the desert was not just about strength, but also about trust and accepting help when it was offered. She spent the evening holding the twins and talking softly to them. She told them about the journey, about the kindness of the Sioux man, and about the strength that they had shown. She wanted them to grow up knowing that even in the most difficult times, help could come, and that courage and patience were powerful. Night fell, and the mother felt a calm settle over the small shelter. She held the twins close and felt their small hearts beating. She thought about the desert, the journey, and the Sioux man, and felt gratitude and peace. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them that they were loved and that they had survived because someone had cared for them. The mother watched over the babies through the night, making sure they were warm and comfortable. She felt a growing confidence in her ability to care for them, and a sense of connection to the people who had helped. She realized that surviving the desert had taught her resilience, patience, and the value of trust and kindness. As dawn approached, she felt renewed strength. She held the babies and thought about the life ahead. She knew that the journey had changed them all, and that the lessons of courage, patience, and care would remain with her and the twins. She whispered softly, telling them they were brave and loved, and that the world held kindness even in unexpected places. The mother felt a quiet joy as she watched the babies sleep. She thought about the Sioux man and the journey through the desert. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and connection, knowing that their lives had been changed forever. She held the twins close and whispered softly, telling them they had survived and that they were loved. The day moved slowly, and she spent time caring for the babies, feeding them, holding them, and watching over them. She felt the weight of the journey, but also the joy of survival. She realized that life could be difficult, but also full of unexpected kindness and strength. She whispered to the babies, telling them they were brave and strong, and that their story would live on. The mother woke early with the babies resting beside her. She felt the cool morning air and the calm of the place that had welcomed them after the desert. She stretched slowly, feeling the strength return to her body. She held the babies close and whispered softly, telling them that they were safe and loved. She watched their tiny hands and feet moving and felt a wave of gratitude for surviving the journey. The people around them began to stir, offering food, water, and blankets. She accepted their help gratefully, letting them guide her through the simple tasks of caring for the babies. She felt her strength returning and the fear of the desert fading. She knew that she had been given a second chance and that the twins had survived against all odds. She thought about the Sioux man who had guided them and the calm confidence he had shown. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. For his presence, she held the babies tightly and whispered softly to them, telling them that someone had cared for them in the desert, and that they were brave and strong. The morning passed slowly with her, tending to the babies she fed them, held them and watched over them, feeling the small rise and fall of their chests. She whispered stories and soft words of comfort. She realized that her love and care were as important as the help they had received from others. The people around her continued to offer support, guiding her through tasks and helping her rest. She felt a sense of safety that had been missing in the desert. She allowed herself to accept their kindness and felt gratitude for the small comforts and care they provided. She held the babies close and felt their warmth and trust as the day went on. She walked slowly with the babies in her arms. She felt the soft breeze and the warmth of the sun on her face. She noticed the small details of the world around her, the gentle movement of leaves, the sound of distant animals, and the way people moved with care. She realized that life could be gentle and nurturing even after hardship. She remembered the long nights in the desert and the fear she had felt. She thought about the Sioux man and the guidance he had given. She felt a deep sense of connection to him and to the land that had tested them. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them that they had survived because of courage and trust, and the help of someone wise. Babies began to stir, and she adjusted them carefully, making sure they were comfortable. She spoke softly, telling them they were safe and loved. She realized that even in the most difficult moments, love and care could provide strength. She felt the small victories of each day as the babies fed and rested and she regained energy. The mother began to plan for the future, thinking about how she would care for the twins and how she could protect them. She realized that the journey through the desert had taught her patience, strength, and the value of trust. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them that they were strong and that life could be kind and nurturing. As the day moved on, she watched the people around her caring for each other. She felt a sense of belonging and connection. She realized that survival was not just about strength, but also about community and kindness. She held the babies close and whispered softly, telling them that they were loved and safe. The mother took time to rest and let her body heal. She held the babies and felt the warmth of their small bodies. She thought about the desert and the challenges they had faced. She realized that surviving had given her new strength and determination. She whispered softly, telling the babies that they had endured and that they were brave and loved. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and she felt the calm of the day. The people around them continued to offer support. She listened to their quiet words of care and guidance. She felt gratitude for their kindness and for the way they had welcomed them. She held the babies close and whispered softly, telling them that they were safe and cherished. She began to teach the babies small lessons through touch and sound. She talked softly, telling them about the importance of patience, courage, and trust. She wanted them to know that life could be challenging, but that love and care could help them overcome any obstacle. She whispered softly, telling them they were brave and strong. The mother walked slowly with the babies resting against her chest. She noticed the beauty of the world around her and felt a deep sense of peace. She remembered the desert and the fear she had faced and realized how far they had come. She whispered softly, telling the babies that they had survived and that life held hope and kindness. As evening approached, she prepared the babies for rest. She held them close and watched their breathing. She reflected on the journey and the Sioux man who had guided them. She felt gratitude and respect for the life lessons she had learned. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them they were safe, loved, and brave. The night settled over the shelter, and she held the twins close. She listened to the soft sounds of the world around her and felt a calm settle in her heart. She thought about the desert, the journey, and the help they had received. She whispered softly, telling the babies that they had survived because of courage, love, and the kindness of others. She spent the night watching over the babies and letting herself rest. She felt a quiet joy and peace. She knew that they had endured fear, pain, and exhaustion, and had come through stronger. She whispered softly to the babies, telling them they were brave, strong, and loved, and that the story of their survival would remain in their hearts forever.